Police misconduct cases have profoundly impacted public perception of law enforcement and underscored systemic issues within the criminal justice system. These cases reveal not only individual acts of brutality but also deep-rooted patterns of abuse and systemic failures that call for urgent reform. One of the most notorious cases is the Rodney King incident in 1991. Rodney King, an African-American motorist, was involved in a high-speed chase with LAPD officers. When he finally stopped, he was violently beaten by multiple officers, an act captured on video by a bystander. The footage showed King being struck repeatedly with batons while he was on the ground, unable to defend himself. Despite the overwhelming visual evidence of excessive force, the officers were acquitted in 1992. This verdict led to the LA riots, highlighting the severe racial tensions and the urgent need for police accountability and reform. The riots, marked by widespread looting and violence, demonstrated the depth of frustration within marginalized communities and called for a re-evaluation of law enforcement practices and their oversight. Another pivotal case is the 2014 death of Eric Garner in Staten Island, New York. Garner, an African-American man, was approached by police officers for allegedly selling loose cigarettes. During the arrest, Officer Daniel Pontalio placed Garner in a chokehold, a maneuver prohibited by NYPD policy. Garner repeatedly pleaded, "I can't breathe," but the officer did not release him. Garner's death, captured on video by a bystander, became a catalyst for the Black Lives Matter movement. The failure to immediately discipline Pontalio and the subsequent grand jury decision not to indict him sparked widespread protests and debates about racial profiling, excessive use of force, and the broader issues of systemic racism within law enforcement. In Chicago, the case of Laquan McDonald in 2014 brought to light significant issues of police misconduct and cover-up. McDonald, a 17-year-old African-American, was shot 16 times by Officer Jason Van Dyke as he walked away from the police. Initial reports suggested McDonald had been a threat, but the release of dashcam footage over a year later revealed the officer's use of lethal force was excessive and unjustified. The video contradicted the official narrative and led to Van Dyke's conviction for second-degree murder, but the delay in releasing the footage and the attempts to suppress the truth highlighted severe problems with police transparency and accountability. The case prompted a federal investigation into the Chicago Police Department and a broader discussion about the need for more rigorous oversight and reform. The 2015 case involving Freddie Gray in Baltimore further exemplified the troubling dynamics of police misconduct. Gray, an African-American man, suffered a fatal spinal cord injury while being transported in a police van. His death, which occurred after he was arrested for possessing a switchblade, was marked by inadequate medical care and rough handling during transport. The ensuing trials for the 6 officers involved ended with mixed results, including acquittals and dropped charges, which fueled public outrage and protests. The case spotlighted issues such as the treatment of detainees, the adequacy of medical care in custody, and the systemic problems within the Baltimore Police Department. The lack of a unified and decisive legal response reinforced the need for comprehensive reforms in how law enforcement agencies handle arrests and the conditions of detainees. The 2020 killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis is perhaps the most globally recognized instance of police misconduct in recent years. Floyd, an African-American man, died after Officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for over 9 minutes during an arrest for a suspected counterfeit $20 bill. Floyd's repeated pleas of, "I can't breathe," were ignored, and his death, recorded on video, sparked an unprecedented wave of protests around the world. The global outcry demanded justice not only for Floyd but also for broader systemic change in policing practices. Chauvin was convicted of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter, marking a significant legal outcome but also highlighting ongoing issues of systemic racism and the need for reform in policing methods. The case spurred legislative proposals and discussions on police reform, emphasizing the necessity for changes in training, oversight, and community relations. Lastly, the 2022 shooting of Jayland Walker in Akron, Ohio, underscores the ongoing challenges in police use of force. Walker, a 25-year-old African American, was shot 46 times by Akron police officers following a traffic stop. The officers fired a barrage of shots as Walker attempted to flee, raising serious questions about the appropriateness and proportionality of the response. The release of body camera footage and the excessive number of shots fired triggered public outcry and calls for increased scrutiny of police tactics and use of deadly force. This case, like the others, illustrates the need for better oversight, more stringent use of force protocols, and greater transparency in police operations. Each of these cases illustrates a pattern of systemic issues within law enforcement agencies, including the misuse of force, lack of accountability, and inadequate oversight. They reveal how instances of police misconduct are not isolated events but part of broader systemic problems that require comprehensive reform. The recurring themes of excessive force, racial bias, and attempts to cover up wrongdoing highlight the necessity for significant changes in how police departments operate. As societies continue to grapple with these issues, the push for meaningful reform remains critical, emphasizing the need for transparency, accountability, and a commitment to upholding the principles of justice and equality for all individuals.